Hello, everybody. It's Andrea. I'm back after a 2-week hiatus. I try to do these more frequently. Last Monday, I tried something a little different. I was trying to incorporate a video directly into the podcasting process rather than saving it for post-production. See my fancy terms, post-production. And I discovered that at my age, learning that coordination skill was a little too much for me. I just couldn't make it happen. And I abandoned the effort after several hours of trying and then was too exhausted to do a podcast for the rest of the week. So sue me. Anyway, with that introduction for my long absence, here I am still trying somewhat different techniques because of doing this video, which continues to throw me. But I will slog on and eventually figure it out. It just takes longer when you're over 60 than when you're under 25. Okay, first thing. If you're looking, it's a very nice picture of Victor Davis Hanson. I was listening to his most recent podcast, and he was discussing the Democrat mindset, which frames everything in terms of violence. And during the course of this discussion, he came up with just the perfect neologism, which I want to share with you. By the way, that video snippet was added post-production because I couldn't figure out how to get the coordination to do it in real time. I know what to do. It's just a matter of getting all the moving parts moving in the right order. I couldn't do it. Anyway, did you catch what he said? Not stochastic terrorism, but scholastic terrorism. And I just loved that because, first, for those not familiar with the term, I don't know where it originates. It sounds very leftist to me. And the first time I heard it was during the whole conservatives finally pushing back against the effort to trans our children, for want of a better phrase, when the left was pushing transgenderism like crazy in every institution during the Biden years. And what people said on the left was that anybody who was conservative, who was saying that transgenderism is a mental condition, it's not a real thing. And I will hasten to add, which I've been tracking for years, there is no medical data at all saying there is such a thing as being born in the wrong body or anything like that. Most of the data just bootstraps on the assumption it's how to treat someone who identifies as transgender. There's nothing that says it's anything but a mental illness. It's just assumed not to be. So people were saying that this pushback created an atmosphere of what they called stochastic terrorism. And it means that you're not actually a terrorist, nor are you even saying terrorist things. You're not the one saying go forth and kill. You're simply creating an environment in which someone is painted in such negative terms that they inevitably become a victim of stochastic terrorism. And of course, what Victor Davis Hanson was speaking of was the fact that this is exactly what the left has done over the years in terms of speaking about Trump and everybody who is MAGA or conservative. If you tell an uninformed population who have just one idea of evil, it's not the devil anymore. Evil is Hitler. If you tell an uninformed population that Trump is Hitler, and Trump is evil, and Trump is fascist, and all his followers are mini Hitlers, and they're Gestapo, and they're this and that, you create an environment in which there is a moral imperative to destroy Trump and all his followers. And the irony that the people doing this embrace values that Hitler would have recognized. He was a socialist, National Socialism. He opted for the fascist version, which instead of having the state own all the means of production, instead had the state own some of the means of production and control all of the means of production while maintaining private ownership. It was a fusion. It's actually what you have in Europe today. Europe has been fascist since the end of World War II in the classic sense, which is soft socialism, which has been getting harder and harder, where the state owns some of the means of production and controls the rest of them. So profit is allowed, which means you have cronies, but it's not pure communism. It's not Soviet or something like that. And the other thing what distinguished Hitler, although I would say this is all socialists. If you go back to Marx, although he'd been raised Jewish until he was 9, his father converted the family when he was 9, so that in first half of the 19th century Germany, they could be part of society. They converted to Lutheranism, and Marx, between, I guess, the conversion and his turning against capitalism, which he associated with Jews because there were some visible Jews, although most Jews lived in abysmal poverty, or were no more capitalist or less capitalist than any other people who believed in the marketplace. Anyway, that was an endless sentence. The point was that Marx was virulently anti-Semitic. And since then, all Marxist regimes, socialist regimes, have been anti-Semitic too. I mean, Stalin had huge purges of the Jews who followed him because they believed that communism would be better than Tsarism, which was also anti-Semitic. And Hitler was the one who took it to the level not of the periodic pogrom, but to actual genocidal slaughter. So the irony is that the people who keep calling us Hitler and Gestapo and Nazis and fascists actually have values that Hitler would have recognized, which is socialism and anti-Semitism. But I've wandered off the path, which is what conversation with me is always like. What I wanted to get back to is how Victor Davis Hanson was talking about what's emanating from the left, which is virulent hatred for Trump and anyone who supports Trump or his values. And in that context, he referred to Jake Tapper using the term stochastic terrorism, although Jake Tapper, I'm not sure how he was using it, because Jake Tapper is one of the people who's been demonizing conservatives and Trump, etc. But anyway, Victor Davis Hanson has a habit of mispronouncing words. He calls Hakeem Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries. He calls Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, Latita James. He has all sorts of funny ways of pronouncing things, and I can never figure out if that's just a little scramble in his brain or if it's a little joke. But anyway, he called it scholastic terrorism. And I thought, my God, that is so precisely accurate. That's exactly right, because the schools, ever since the 1930s, 40s, 50s, but accelerating in the 60s and going on steroids and hyper steroids in the 21st century, have consistently been training. They've been indoctrinating the rising tide of leftism. And so it is scholastic terrorism. It does come from academia. And he referenced a study from the Skeptic Research Center, and I went and dug it up. So let me share this one with you. Let me see if I can get this right. Technical difficulties again. I struggle. Okay, there it is. This is from the Daily Caller, and I'm going to read what I grabbed there. People with graduate degrees, like the man who allegedly tried to kill President Donald Trump and his cabinet members on Saturday, are more likely to support political violence, polling shows. A 2025 report by the Skeptic Research Center found that people who hold graduate degrees are about twice as likely to believe that violence is often necessary to create social change, compared to those who have completed lower-level college degrees or opted out of higher education altogether. Cole Allen, who allegedly opened fire at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday with a stated intention to kill members of the Trump administration, reportedly obtained a master's degree in computer science from Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. I've never heard of the Dominguez Hills. Maybe it's a new campus. Among those who hold a high school diploma or less, only 23% believe that political violence can be justified, according to the poll. That's still a whole lot of people in America who think political violence can be justified. This is me. That's not the essay. As I've told maybe to you guys or maybe in writing, in 1981, when the assassination attempt on Reagan occurred, which did indeed almost kill him, I was on the UC Berkeley campus and everybody was celebrating and saying what a shame it was it didn't happen. So it tells you that's where the stochastic terrorism, scholastic terrorism was already happening. And I went home and I repeated that to my parents, and my parents were absolutely horrified. First of all, they said it's immoral just to wish for someone's death because you disagree with them. But they also said that assassination throws a country into complete chaos. It's unbelievably destructive to the political order and the social order. And I took that lesson home. I've never again had that thought, but now it's gone far beyond Berkeley and been completely normalized. So high school diploma or less is 23%. About 20% of individuals who have completed some college or obtained an associate's degree believe the same. The figure was slightly higher for those who hold a bachelor's degree, with 26% agreeing with the statement. So if you hadn't gone to high school or just had if you hadn't gone to college or had a teeny bit of college, 23%. That's over 1/5 of Americans. Yeah, I think my math is right. Higher for bachelor's degree with 26%. So we're edging up to a quarter of the population. However, the article continues, among master's degree graduates, a whopping 40% saying violence could be justified to enact social change. Think about that. 40% of people who hang around academia for more than 4 years. 40%. And by the way, I misspoke because everybody knows I misspoke. It wasn't 1/5 or 1/4 of the American population. It was just 1/4 of the population who's gone through education. And it's getting confusing to me because math always messes me up. But by now you guys know what I mean. It's still really high numbers. Because when you think about it, every American has a high school diploma if it's a GED. So we're looking at 23% of every American. And then as you look at smaller and smaller subsections of every American, those who have 4-year degrees and those who just never leave, who become professional students, a huge number of them believe in political violence, which is up to and including assassination. And lest you think this is hypothetical, just think of Black Lives Matter and in 2020, and then just recently the ICE riots. So this is a very real and present danger. It also explains why Democrats are so desperate to have taxpayers fund higher education. It's not about a more educated population. It's not about a wiser population. It's not about a population that understands the Western canon and our system and our form of government. It is about getting a leftist educated indoctrination. On that note, moving on to the next subject. And if you're looking, what you see is a man flying off a cliff. He's ripping off a smiling happy face mask as he jumps off the cliff. And beneath the mask, you see the hammer and sickle of communism. And what I was saying to a friend is that the Democrat Party needs a new name. And I thought the Suicide Party, it doesn't really sound good. Maybe the Mors Voluntaria Party, or in Latin, the Voluntary Death Party, which was the original Latin term for suicide. Suicide, which has Latin roots, only came along later. I was talking about it in the context of rooting for Iran to win the war. You may not agree with the war. There are valid reasons for that. I know conservatives who don't. They were concerned about economic dislocation. They felt that Trump jumped the gun. They were worried about getting into an endless war. Today, as I record this, it's May 4th. Iran has restarted hostilities and the U.S. will inevitably respond. So there are legitimate reasons. The midterms are coming up, yada, yada, a lot to worry about. But there's some things we know for a fact about Iran. Iran has been seeking a nuclear weapon for decades. Iran boasted that it is 2 weeks away from having fissile material. Iran has proven with its attack on Diego Garcia, the mid-range ballistic missile it launched, that once it gets fissile nuclear material, it will have all of Europe under the shadow of its nuclear dominance. It has freely announced that it intends to use a nuclear weapon against Israel and utterly destroy it, although, of course, that's going to appeal to leftists. It is working on the capacity to attack America with a nuclear weapon. It calls America the Great Satan. Israel is merely the little Satan, but they have proximity. It has been an acknowledged fomenter of terrorism around the world. It has killed Americans, the Beirut bombing, during the Iraq War. It was constantly sending in fighters. It is a bad actor. In January and February, I believe it's Amnesty International, which is no conservative site, and other non-conservative humanitarian groups are also saying that it killed 35 to 40,000 of its own people who had been protesting. So this was not just Trump propaganda. This is a very real claim. Bad actor. The Democrats, some more loudly than others, like Senator Chris Murphy, but really across the board, except for John Fetterman, are rooting for Iran to win. They are rooting for a country that will go unfettered if Trump hadn't stepped in and Israel hadn't stepped in, will go nuclear, has stated its intentions to destroy an entire country with a nuclear weapon, and has stated its intention to destroy America. Death to America isn't just a slogan. And moreover, it's also a country that's 12er Shia ideology says that if they want the hidden imam to come back to begin a new age of worldwide Islamic Shia caliphate, headed, of course, by Iran, it's up to Iran to jumpstart the apocalypse. So it's not just that an apocalypse will happen and the hidden imam will come back and then Iran will eventually rule the world in a glorious Islamic paradise. Iran thinks it's its job to get that started. Bad country, evil country. Even if you don't like the war, you should be hoping we win it. It's not what the left wants. The Democrats want Iran to lose. And want America to lose. I am just in dyslexic city. I'm actually going to be off for almost 3 weeks at the end of May and the beginning of June. Lovely family matters and travel and stuff. I badly need that vacation because I'm talking in spaghetti talk. So if you're translating in your brain, you probably know what I mean. If I say something manifestly wrong, I probably meant to say the right thing. It's just spaghetti brain. Speaking of rooting for insanity and the destruction of America, this next one that I'm going to talk about goes to the image of someone jumping off a cliff while ripping the smiley face off to reveal full-bore communism. Because for decades, Democrats have gotten away with saying we're the nice people. We care about the little people. We just want to make life better for homeless people. We want social support. You just need more money for social. They just need a little more help. And transgender, they're our sisters and our brothers, or our brothers and sisters. They're really not sure. But we need to be kind for them. And gay people, they shouldn't be persecuted because of how they love, which I agree with. But of course they should be in your child's classroom, and of course they should be leading Boy Scout troops, and of course they should be promoting drag queens in the library, and of course they should be having porn books in the library at your kids' middle and high school about how to have gay sex. We like them. So they're getting more and more and more extreme, but if you want serious extreme, this one is amazing. You can see it on the screen just barely. I will read it to you. It is from Fox News, and it's entitled Rashida Tlaib's new, quote, unhoused Bill of Rights, close quote, would protect homeless camping. That is an understatement. Actually, before I read it to you, I'm going to do a little introduction because I grew up in San Francisco and I worked for several decades in downtown San Francisco before leaving that benighted city. So I saw a lot of homeless people. They are pathetic, and my personal observations support what the statistics show, which is that the ones downtown were lifers. None of them were people who were just down on their luck. They were people who were mentally ill, and they were substance abusers. And very often there was an intersection. I don't know if they were mentally ill and self-treated with substances, or substance abuse made them mentally ill. But these were not just families huddled in a car, with Fido at their side, trying to get through a bad time after dad was laid off. These were lifers who lived on the streets, slept in doorways, were perpetually inebriated, were often in very, very poor health. Couldn't do anything with them if they didn't want to be treated. The most you could do was take them in for what's called a 5150, which is a 3-day observation. And if they were deemed not to be a danger to themselves or other, they had to be released. Well, the question is, what's a danger to oneself or another? If you're eating trash, peeing on yourself in the street, defecating in corners, I would say you are damaging society as a whole and are living such a substandard life that if the metric is you're not dead yet, well, I guess you're not a danger to yourself. It is a horrible thing. I've often mentioned I have a friend who made different life choices than I and got into the drug culture. And my friend tells me a lot about homeless people. For example, the man who was a heroin addict and was actually gangrenous and had maggots all over him, but did not want to get off the streets because it would mean giving up heroin. That story actually has a happy ending because people who cared about him, unconstrained by laws saying 5150 pickups and only 3 days, basically forced him off the street and got him on methadone, and he's doing actually very well on methadone. So there are happy endings, but few and far between. So with that as a background, this is Rashida Tlaib's plan. Rep. Rashida Tlaib introduced legislation last week. Now understand, it's not binding legislation, it's a statement. It's a policy idea. Introduced legislation last week that would significantly expand rights for the homeless and overhaul how the government treats Americans living on the streets by siphoning billions from defense spending. So right there, you see where she's going. This is a statement. And homeless rights, what are rights? I mean, this is something the government is going to take from someone else, from us, from taxpayers, from our national security. And in a minute, you'll hear from the very livability of our communities. Back to the text. The Unhoused Persons Bill of Rights calls for government-led intervention to end homelessness over the next 3 years and introduces more than a dozen protections for homeless people. If passed, Tlaib's legislation would include freedom of movement for homeless people in public spaces, affordable housing, livable wages, not that they're working, just wages for being homeless, universal health care, and panhandling, which means the right to stand on the sidewalk and beg for money, covered in urine and possibly talking to the voices in their head. Under the resolution, homeless individuals would have the, quote, right to uninhibited access, close quote, to public parks, transportation, facilities, sidewalks, buildings, restrooms, and other spaces, meaning they could legally set up camp in such public spaces. In other words, their right takes away from your right to have a clean city, safe parks and streets for your children, clean and safe bathrooms, all gone. And I remember that from the hippies when they took over the Panhandle and indeed took over a park near my house, which we used to play at and could play at no longer once the hippies, that generations of homeless, took over. Back to the text. The homeless population would also be given the right to internet access and the necessary technology to achieve that. Again, they can theoretically go to public libraries, but they take over. They smell horrible. They're scary. They're crawling with lice. People's children can't go there. Normal people can't go there. The bathrooms become their showers and God knows what. Tlaib's proposal would, however, grant the homeless population, and then I forgot to put in what I'm quoting where I snipped, but obviously you can tell there was some text I skipped. Tlaib's proposal would, however, grant the homeless population freedom from harassment by law enforcement, private businesses, property owners, and housed residence, meaning that if someone is camping on your lawn, the likelihood is that the police would not be able to remove them, because really private property is evil. And if you have a home, you must have done it by exploiting someone else, possibly that very drugged out, mentally ill, homeless person who's spouting obscenities and crying about killing himself and others. And back to the text, specifically, homeless individuals would be given protections against quote unquote banishment from private property, which the Michigan Democrats' measure characterizes as a violation of an individual's fundamental civil and human rights. Now, Tlaib must know that there's not a snowball's chance in the devil's domain that this is going to pass. There's no way even the crazy, well, I shouldn't say that. The craziest Democrats will join her. It will be a statement. It will die in the House. I doubt it will make it to Senate. The Senate, no sane president, no matter how left-wing in this current generation, would pass it. But the point is that the next generation may be that crazy. You may recall that Politico published an essay yesterday or the day before. Barney Frank is at the end of his life. He doesn't seem to be dying. He has congestive heart failure. My mother suffered from that for years, but he's going into what he called hospice, and he's doing a round of farewell interviews, and he is promoting a book that he'll be publishing soon. And basically, the book says, I agree with everything, as I gather this from the interviews, I agree with everything you say, but please don't be so obvious about it. Because what he recognizes is that Democrats made a lot of strides when they were all sweet and loving and kind, and they're losing ground now that they've ripped that smiley face mask off and are showing that their affinity is for an utterly evil regime, which the Iranian mullahs regime is, and it's one that horribly persecutes the Persian people and that sows death and destruction around the world, and that has America in its crosshairs. So that's totally ripping off the mask and showing the Islamo-Marxist nexus. And they're also transing the children. That's evil. That's not just about being kind and respectful to people who are obviously crazy, or about not criminalizing someone's brother who happens to prefer boys to girls. It's an entire agenda that is a destruction of the Judeo-Christian Enlightenment world order from which America sprang. And now with this absolute crackpot thing to literally let the lunatics take over every public space, this is the kind of thing Barney Frank warned against. Again, he's just asking them to keep the mask on a little longer. He doesn't expect to see that, I think, before he dies, but he's hopeful. Speaking of the homeless, how I would handle it, I would arrest all of them for vagrancy. Every last one of them. But prison would not just be tossed into a cell and into common areas and that's not what they need. As I said, most of them are mentally ill or have substance abuse problems. I would have programs within the prisons for substance abuse, and they would be released from prison when their sentence ends or their 60 days clean, whichever comes first. And if they end up back in prison because they're back on drugs, sentences keep getting longer and longer and longer. A disincentive to use drugs and alcohol, especially if they come out clean. Regarding the mentally ill, sentence, and again, the same thing, they get treatment if they're clearly functional, not barely functional. Clearly functional does not include eating out of garbage cans, sleeping in doorways, peeing and pooing on the streets. No, they have to be functional. And so functional or their sentence ends, whichever is later. Now, having said that, some people will never be functional. And in that, we have to be extraordinarily careful, because wherever people are housed in prisons or institutions, there's money flowing. There's psychiatrists, there's special dorms. You have to be really, really careful that people are not trapped there forever who do not deserve to be trapped there. The oversight must be intense. But someone who is a paranoid schizophrenic who refuses treatment, and who is a danger to himself and to others merely by virtue of living in the streets that way, society needs protection from those people. And it's not just protection from the imminent threat that they'll suddenly do what happened in San Francisco many years ago, where a guy just started attacking a girl standing in line at a neighborhood bakery and stabbed her quite violently. But the destruction of civil society, the filth, the scariness, the breakdown of institutions, all should be over. Now I'm ready for the next one, and we'll see how I do once again with the technical ends of this. So I call this chapter Sex Fiends in Congress. And if you're looking at if you're just listening and can't see the video, what it shows is someone who looks remarkably like Eric Swalwell. It's a cartoon, and he is standing in what's obviously a church basement, and the sign on the back says Congressional Chapter Sex Addicts Anonymous. And this person who looks remarkably like Eric Swalwell, but I am not saying it is Eric Swalwell, is saying, my name is Eric and I'm a sex addict. So I think by now you've heard about Eric Swalwell's sexcapades. We got hints of it, but the guy is an absolute slut. And I have a slide of him. Let me see, because I did funky things here and I might not be able to find it. So let me see if I can find that slide in a minute. So that is not this. Is it this? No, it's not. Is this one? It is not. I'm just going to read from to you. It is from the Daily Caller. I forgot to load it. Believe me when I say I'm quoting accurately. Former Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell was accused by multiple women of sending messages, including videos of him pleasuring himself, after becoming one of the first members of Congress to join Snapchat in an effort to restore, quote, faith, close quote, in, quote, democracy, close quote. In a bombshell report on Sunday, less than a month after Swalwell resigned from Congress after being accused of rape and sexual assault by multiple women, CNN spoke to more than a dozen women who claimed the congressman had made them feel uncomfortable both in person and online over the past decade. That is an understatement, although maybe they were comfortable with what he did. So snip, snip, snip. One young woman claimed Swalwell would send her Snapchat messages about her future before asking inappropriate questions such as, what are you wearing? I mean, the cool thing about Snapchat is you couldn't hear the heavy breathing, I guess, that went with that. Back to the text. Two other women told CNN that Swalwell sent them, quote, sexually explicit messages and unsolicited nude photos and videos of himself, close quote, in 2021, while a third woman also claimed to have received, quote, sexually tinged messages and videos. One former congressional staffer allegedly developed a consensual sexual relationship with Swalwell after he began flirting with her on Snapchat in 2021. What's worth pointing out is that at all times, relevant times, he was married with several children. I don't know if he had all three at that point, but this was a married man, and he was, of course, in Congress. During the relationship, Swalwell reportedly sent, quote, nude photos of himself and videos of him pleasuring himself, which, close quote, which showed the congressman's, quote, face and naked body, close quote. Now, they say during the relationship Swalwell reportedly sent. In fact, the text continues, the videos, which were saved by the woman, were shown to CNN. So I guess they're leaving wiggle room in case Swalwell claims that they're AI videos or Russian hoaxes or Fang's revenge or something. And so I'm quoting her again. His stories would be his congressional content, but then he would send me pictures of his nether regions, she alleged, adding that Swalwell sent her another, quote, explicit video, close quote, late last year, just weeks before he announced his 2026 California gubernatorial campaign. In another alleged case, Swalwell reportedly wrote a letter of recommendation for a woman he had never met after sending her flirty Snapchat messages about her, quote, sexy pajamas, unquote. So, I cannot believe that nobody in Congress knew about this and that the Democrat Party didn't know about this. They all knew. This is always what goes on. As long as you're useful, nobody says anything. Now, I'm a big believer in remorse, repentance, and redemption. Democrats love to point to Pete Hegseth's affairs, which he has not denied, or to Trump's being on his third wife and having been a playboy. But these are men who put their past behind them. It's up to them and their moral arbiter, if they believe in God, and Pete Hegseth and Trump both say they do, to deal with those moral failings. In public, they live lives of rectitude. They're under such a microscope they couldn't do anything else. And Pete Hegseth clearly has rejected that lifestyle and repented of it. Trump is never going to quite speak in those terms, but it's very clear that he's no longer the hound dog of the 1970s and 1980s. And certainly he's done a great job with his kids. Eric Swalwell was doing all this while using his power as a congressman. And he was doing all this while presenting himself as holier than thou. And there's no evidence that he is at all remorseful. What it reminds me of is one of my favorite scenes from Gone with the Wind, which I think is one of the greatest books in America. And that's not because it's a celebration of the Confederate South and slavery. It's because through the moral eyes of Rhett Butler, it is a savage attack on the Confederacy, utterly savage. People miss that because they're so taken up with Scarlett's soap opera. Her soap opera is boring. It's Rhett's commentary about the Confederacy that's so interesting, and about the post-Confederate world, and about the hypocrisy. It's a great, great book. But there's a scene early on. Scarlett has married Charlie, what's his name again? Charles Hamilton, Melanie's brother. And then she, after the war, and she's not happy being married, but there she is, married to him. After the war, she insists on setting herself up as a businesswoman. She gets attacked by a black and a white man from a homeless encampment, and the men feel honor bound to go and clean out the homeless encampment. It's, sort of proto-KKK stuff, and Charles Hamilton gets killed. And Rhett visits a house, and Scarlett's in her widow's weeds, weeping profusely and drinking. Oh no, this wasn't Charles Hamilton. I'm sorry, he died early in the war. This was Frank, her second husband, when she took over his business. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've read the book, and I did mention Spaghetti Brain. Anyway, Frank. And so she's weeping copiously, she's drunk, and she's terribly worried that she's done something sinful and awful and that she'll be punished for it. And what Rhett Butler says is, Scarlett, you are like the thief who is not sorry he stole, but who's terribly, terribly sorry he got caught. And that's where I think Eric Swalwell is. And I very soon expect him to say that, well, he's sorry he got caught and he shouldn't have done it. He has an excuse. He's a sex addict. That's what we're going to hear soon. But it seems there are a lot of sex addicts in Congress, because my own rep, Nancy Mace, is starting to go through the papers, and she is naming names. Now, she's very careful. Some of the names she's named are dead, and all of the names she's named, including, of course, the dead ones, are no longer in Congress. And she has been bipartisan, but what she says is she's going to start naming the people who were the American taxpayer paid out money to settle sex harassment claims. Now, it should be said that these claims were settled without adjudication. They were settled based on accusations. And it's perfectly possible that the party Solons decided that rather than get bogged down in fighting accusations that everyone believed were false, it was still easier just to pay off the women and make them go away. That, after all, is what Trump said he did with Stormy Daniels. I happen to believe that's a very real possibility. It's also possible he slept with her, but, since he was already stable with Melania, I'm doubtful about that. We absolutely know that women make fake sexual harassment and rape claims for their financial benefit or to hide that they were sleeping around or for revenge. In he said, she said situations, I'm always very careful not to assume the accusations are correct. I don't believe all women. In fact, I don't believe many women. I love my women friends. I'm happy to be a woman, but in today's world, the pendulum has swung a little too far in favor of believing all women. Anyway, she says that Republican Rodney Alexander, $15,000 paid on his behalf in 2007. In 2009, the office of Carolyn McCarthy, a woman, paid off $8,000. She's since dead. She's a Democrat. 2010, 23 separate incidents involving Democrat Eric Massa, who is a former congressperson, totaling over $100,000. In 2010, Democrat John Conyers, $50,000. And again, in 2014, there was some sort of severance pay of $27,000. Connors is dead. 2014, Republican Blake Farenthold, $84,000. He is retired from Congress. And in 2017, Republican Patrick Meehan, and that was for almost $40,000. So what she's pointing out is that the one woman at least, or maybe someone in the office of Caroline McCarthy. I shouldn't have assumed it was she who did someone in her office, but that Congress is a giant frat house. And, Biden's pals, Kennedy and what's his name again, who did the waitress sandwich, probably were not alone. And here's the deal. Whenever you have powerful men, you are going to have sex. Women are drawn to power, which is what Trump said in that infamous open access or whatever tape. He didn't say he did anything. He said that when you are rich and powerful, women will let you do things. And I'm sure he knew what he was talking about. And powerful men also have that sense, going back to ancient tribes, that if you're powerful, you get access to sex. It is one of the perks of power. And whether or not all women find it an aphrodisiac, many powerful men certainly do. And so when you have powerful people and a society that is post-moral, you're going to have this kind of stuff. So I don't think anyone should be surprised. I suspect now that Nancy Mace has gone on a rampage, a lot of people are going to be very worried, and the defense is going to be what I predict, which is, I didn't do it, but it was easier to pay her off than have a scandal. So this is where our politics are just circling the drain. We need a great awakening. We need a moral awakening in America, because no country can survive neolitism, which is where we are now. On that very cheerful note, I will say goodbye. And as always, 45 minutes. I meant it to be 30 minutes because with the video, these take hours and hours and hours to upload, which is why I record them one day and publish them the next, because it takes that long to upload them. But here I am, 45 minutes. That seems to be my time. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I'm endlessly grateful. I have actually profited from you guys. I have made $150 after doing podcast now for 6 years. And I must say there's been an exponential growth rate. I earned $40 in the first 5 years of podcasting, but since I've started doing it for American Thinker, you guys are enriching me. At this rate, I think when I'm something like 650 years old, I'll be a very rich woman. Thanks again, and back to you as soon as I can. No promises exactly when.